Hi, Keith. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I reached out to Keith because his city and environment paintings evoke so much emotions every time I see his work. It is my opinion that it isn't easy to have your work evoke emotions when people aren't the main focus of your art. That's why Keith's paintings are really special. And before we begin, Keith, where can people see your work?
You can see my work pretty much at two galleries. One is called Kako Gallery. It's Kako Gallery, and they are in the heart of the French Quarter, New Orleans. And then out in the Garden District is their other kind of sister gallery called 1920 Magazine, which is their address. It's 1920 Magazine Street. And so both handles are on Instagram under @Kako Gallery and @1920 Magazine. And those are they are my exclusive representatives. So it's really the only place to see my work.
Fantastic. And everybody, please check out his work. It's really, really awesome. With all the things as artists you can have your art focus on, why do you have city streets and landmarks as your emphasis?
I've always been a huge movie fan. And one of the things, like kind of looking back, one of the things that always grabbed my eye without me really knowing it, I guess it grabbed my imagination, is the environment, is the setting. And so that's kind of the way I look at my cityscape paintings, is the backdrop of a movie. That's how I kind of feel. And if it's done right, like when you watch Chinatown or you watch Mean Streets or even something like Bram Stoker's Dracula, there's such a depth to the environment that it becomes a character in and of itself. Like you walk out of there thinking, okay, I enjoyed this actor in the role and I liked all that. But man, oh man, where that movie was set, like where these actors, the environment they created there walking around in, that becomes such a major component of what's compelling and interesting and what's so vibrant about the memory of the story. And so that is kind of what I end up imagining in my mind and seeing the environments that way.
Your personal art style really makes me want to go visit the places you paint. And I see a lot of environment and landscape paintings, and I don't always feel this way. Did you know that your art was so gravitating?
You know, I don't. It's funny. It's such a different style from what I kind of have seen in galleries. I mean, I'm definitely not trying to toot my own horn. I haven't seen materials applied this way. And I'm not really claiming to make it up either. When you go into galleries, you don't see this kind of look, I guess, for lack of a better word. And so I think a lot of people, when I'm there one-on-one and talking to people, I almost don't feel like they know quite what to make of it. They say, oh, it almost looks like a comic book, or almost looks like an illustration. And those are apt observations. But they end up kind of staring at it in a way that I can't always tell what is going on inside their minds. But I'm glad to hear you say that, because just because you get a couple thousand likes on an Instagram post, that doesn't mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, that doesn't necessarily mean that people actually really do like it. It's much better if someone that sees it like you have seen it and can say that. And so I like that. I don't know. I'm glad you like it.
Did you have to go through some evolution to get to this particular style? Because, like I said, I see the work and it evokes emotion. It makes me want to go there. I feel like you capture the essence of that environment. Mm-hmm. Did you go through a lot of iterations to get to this style, or was this something you already created early on and you just polished it to make it look this way?
I definitely did go through an evolution. I spent a number of years really admiring the work of what is called the photorealists. So people like Chuck Close and Richard Estes and Davis Cohn and Rod Penner and some others that are able to paint so realistically that, especially in a digital version, it's indistinguishable from a photo. And so I could never understand, like, how are they doing this? Like, what is going on? Especially this guy, Rod Penner, because he paints in acrylic and I paint in acrylic. And it was just driving me mad trying to figure out, what does he know that I don't know? And so I kind of went through stages where I was like, okay, well, I need to learn some things because I'm just not there. Even though I had a lot of experience in art and I went to art school, I was like, they're doing something different. They have another level. And so once I read a few books and kind of went to some exhibitions and talked to some artists, I kind of figured out a few of those things. And so anyway, I was kind of working with the urban environment, like you've seen, New Orleans and New York, and my hometown was Denver, so I was painting a lot of Denver because paint what you know, right? So I'm here, so I was painting those kinds of things. And people were telling me, oh, I like your subject matter, but I felt like the technique was leaving them cold a little because it was so mechanical and so precise. And I'm certainly not any kind of famous artist. So there was no like thought of being an investor or they would say, oh yeah, well, I'm going to scoop this up while I can still afford it. So I ended up with this kind of a backlog of paintings just kind of hanging around in my basement. I really had to look at them one day and say, okay, I think for lack of a better word, these paintings are, even though I spent, there were some paintings where I would spend 200 hours on them. I mean, wow. It's a long time. And yet, despite all the effort and love and everything like that being poured into them, they were boring. They were kind of boring. And so I had to really take a hard look and step back and say, what am I doing wrong? Or what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Then the answer came to me that if I paint it so faithfully that it really either looks like a photo or it looks like real life, however you want to phrase that, I think those are different things, that people can see that already. They can walk outside and look down the street and they can say, yeah, that sure does look like this hotel, or that sure does look like this diner. And yep, sure got it. And so there was nothing compelling about it. And so I really had to go back and analyze my kind of application method and ask myself, how do I make this more interesting? What do I do? And so it took some trial and error. And I remember I had this one painting of an oyster house down in New Orleans called Felix's Oyster House. And I had it all methodically drawn out and transferred onto the board and ready to start painting. And I just took this leap of faith and I thought, okay, I have an idea. I'm going to try rendering this in a completely different way, and I may ruin it. And if I ruin it, I'm going to be ruining about, 20 hours of work that I have wrapped up into it so far, like getting it ready to go to that stage. So if you've seen what I do now, everything's kind of outlined in ink, a lot of lines around things. And because I really kind of, at the end of the day, I always think of myself more as a draftsman than I do as a painter. And so that's what I did, is I just decided to draw, just kind of ink it all in, and then start layering in glazes over the top of that and let the colors mix visually, by transparent layer through transparent layer, rather than mixing everything on the palette. And then it had a lot of neon lights and it was set at night. And so it gave me a really chance to make the neon lights glow. And I'll tell you, that was my breakthrough piece where I could really look at it and say, oh, like this is, even though it was so much faster to do, it was probably more like 20 hours of painting or maybe 30 hours of painting, but versus 150 or 200. But it was the thing was, it was 10 times more interesting. It was compelling. There was movement. The lights looked like they glowed. That was exactly what I wanted, and it got me out of that kind of boring, robotic way of painting that had been that I hampered myself with for probably close to a decade.
Wow. And thank you for giving us insight on that. Let me ask you about your process. There's one particular art piece called West 47th Street. Now, I noticed this thing is like circa 1960s. What's your reference materials to do that? Or is that a photo? How do you create a process like that? And for you listeners, go check out that West 47th Street piece because it does have that nostalgia feel to it. And so I'd love to talk about how you created that.
They do, yes. So part of my kind of thing, as I started to paint this way, people were telling me kind of right away, they say, Keith, your work looks very nostalgic. And I almost kind of had a chuckle like, well, I'm not trying to make it be nostalgic. This is reference material that I took 2 weeks ago. But then as I thought about it, I'm like, well, what's the difference between something that looks nostalgic and something that is nostalgic? And it's like, well, it could be a few buildings that are different in a given city scene, but there might not be even the buildings that are different. It could just be the people in their clothes, and it could just be the cars. And so there are, now the one you're talking about actually was kind of my practice. Let me back up on that one just a tad, because I was determined, well, so I've been working with a lot of night imagery, night scenes, glowing lights and things like that. And glazing night stuff kind of became easy for me, or at least I understood the process. And I wanted to try glazing a daytime scene. So it's kind of buildings fall off in the distance and they get that sense of atmospheric perspective where, the further buildings are being covered up by a little bit more air. And so they're kind of fading to another color. And in this case, kind of a light, almost a yellow. And so that was straight up just searching through online archives and finding old pictures of New York, because I was kind of doing a New York series. And I thought, well, let's see if I can apply this to a really old image just as is, and see, am I going to really like painting these cars and the old taxis and the, men in business suits and fedoras going to work. And because I've been very inspired by the setting. I'm not the only one I know, but like a lot of people love Mad Men. And it's just such an interesting time period, because I wasn't alive then, and it's easy to romanticize. And, despite a lot of the turmoil going on in the country at the time, visually speaking, the 60s are super, super rich. And so that one, the one you're talking about specifically, was kind of my dipping my toes into the process of painting a daytime scene, but also the era, kind of seeing, okay, what can I do with this? And once I found out how much I liked it and what I can do with it, I've had the confidence now to move forward and paint. So like, for example, commission I did recently was based in the French Quarter of New Orleans. And there's a company in Texas, a chain of restaurants, they're kind of a crab boil chain. And I think they're kind of small. I think they have maybe 5 or 6 locations now, but they're trying to expand. So they called Smashing Crab. And they wanted me to reimagine it as if their restaurant was in the French Quarter in the post-war 50s. And so
so cool.
And it was so much fun to do. So I went there and I took a bunch of reference photos of the area that I thought would be a good fit for their theme. And then once I had my reference photos of the street and the buildings, then I just went back and found people in poses that I liked, and I found cars, and I redrew them all in the right angles, and I did all the the kind of the hard work of figuring out the geometry and the perspective to build a virtual. Actually, it was they're all 40s, so build a virtual 1940s, but build that into a modern cityscape, photograph that I took. So that long story long, I guess, is just I wanted to have confidence to say, here's my building block, like here's my geometry, here's my sky, here's my lighting, here's the mood. Now I can swap any kind of car into it. I can put people anywhere I want into it, because I understand how perspective works and eye levels work and all that kind of stuff. And I can find the right pose, but I can add and subtract and delete costume elements. And really, so it kind of feels like now I've built that movie scene, like I'm building a still from a movie, including populating it with characters and really telling a full story. So it isn't just buildings or just people or just cars or anything, but it's like really reconstructing the entire environment from scratch.
A couple more questions, and we'll start transitioning to getting to know you and your upbringing and how you became an artist. But a couple more here. So who are your typical buyers of your work? Who are the people who are fans of your work? Is there a typical target audience that appreciate your work?
I feel like the people who like my work, well, number one, they like realism. That's something I battle a lot in galleries. Is one of the galleries that shows my work, the Keiko Gallery. They represent a wide variety of artists. And I was actually there last weekend hosting an event and doing a live demonstration. And there would be people who walk in and, bless their hearts. I mean, they're just being honest. So you can't really fault them for that. I was sitting there working on this big painting, and they would walk up to it and just say, without even knowing I was the artist or even being really aware of a person there, they'd say, I just don't really care for realism. Like, oh, well, that's just the thing I dedicated my life to, but hey, whatever. We have a lot of other stuff inside, so definitely it's got to be somebody who digs that kind of representational thing. I also think people who kind of admit that they have a nostalgic bent to their psyche, like they look at the past fondly and they want to understand it and look at it and remember it, celebrate it a little bit. So there's a lot of that where people, I don't know. When I look in old family photos, I can just look at those things for hours. And I love looking at what my grandpa was wearing. And I love looking at the car that he was driving. And I always just kind of talk to myself and say, gosh, what was it like? Like, what was on the radio that day when they took this picture? And here he is in front of this soda fountain. Like, what were they having for lunch? And it's like, how much was that ham sandwich? It was 70 cents. Just think about all these details and they fascinate me. And so I think my target audience, if you want to call it that, or just the people who like my work, are probably people who have similar thoughts when they look at old pictures. Is they just think, oh, if I could spend a day, just a day there and feel what it feels like to be in the city, in the 50s or the 60s or the 40s or whenever it is, kind of wrap my mind around what their existence was like. I think those are the people who tend to like my work.
Okay. And finally, how do you choose what street, what landmark, what city to paint? How do you choose your locations?
That's a tough one. So one of the things I don't do, and it drives my wife crazy because she doesn't see it the same way as I do. So we were in Paris a year and a half ago, not only pre-COVID, but pre-fire at the Notre Dame. So I guess that was 2 years ago. And I took all these reference photos in Paris, and I did several Paris paintings. But among them, you will not find the Arc de Triomphe. You won't find the Eiffel Tower. You won't find the Louvre. And it's just because I'm not interested in doing the postcard kind of image because everyone else has done it. And they've probably done it as well or better than I can do it. So why do it again? If I know that somebody actually, because going back to how my photorealistic style was, I remember spending, so I painted this bar in New Orleans called Pat O'Brien's, reportedly the busiest bar in the world, and inventor of maybe not inventor of the hurricane, but certainly home of the hurricane drink. And I spent, again, weeks, months painting the super hyper realistic exterior of it. There's an American flag waving in the front, and I painted every stripe and every star and all these plants and all this kind of stuff. And I got done with it, and I was like, I really like this. Like, this looks terrific. This looks just like Pat O'Brien's. This is fantastic. And I go online, and I just was going to look them up to kind of maybe send a picture of it to their management to see if they would like it. And when Google Images came up, I saw that about 20 random people had posted photographs that in composition and angle and everything were virtually identical to what I just spent weeks trying to paint.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh gosh, like anybody with a cell phone could just walk up and snap a picture that looks exactly like what I just painted. That's probably not good. That is not a good marketing strategy, for sure not. So I really had to think about that.
Gotcha. Let's transition to your upbringing and how art became your choice of a profession.
Sure. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was going to ask, just tell us how your journey to wanting to be an artist as you were growing up.
I guess it depends on how far back you want to go, but going pretty far back, I was always a kid who felt at home entertaining myself for hours. I could sit there and build card houses. I could play video games. I mean, I never had any problem kind of being left to my own devices around the house. And so as a result, one of the things I also always like to do is draw. And my dad worked for the federal government. They had just reams and reams of paper where they would print random, junk on one side and then basically throw it away. And so he was always free and allowed to bring home their extra paper that they were just getting rid of. They weren't even recycling it. They were just throwing it away. And so I would just end up every couple of weeks with a giant ream of 200 sheets of like crisp white paper on one side, random numbers and whatever on the other side. And I'd decide, well, I might as well draw. I mean, I can only play so much Atari. So that was kind of what I did. And I would just draw everything out of my imagination and dinosaurs and animals and superheroes and pretty much anything you could think of. It's one of those kind of chicken and the egg things, like which comes first, the ability to want to draw or the ability to be good at drawing. Because when I look at my old drawings, they are not, there's just no hint that anything good is to come. They just look like regular little kid scribblings. For sure. But like they say, in martial arts, they always say that a black belt is just a white belt that never quit. It felt like it's very, very similar in art. It's like I just had that desire to keep going and keep improving. And I always was a kid who I enjoyed art history, where when I took it in college, some kids would think it was just such a slog to get through. And I really enjoyed learning about all the different art styles, who invented what and where did it come from. And I never had any problem memorizing the names and the dates and things like that because I actually was genuinely interested in it. So it seemed like a natural career path. And so my major in college was graphic design because it kind of seemed like everyone was kind of telling me at the time, like, Keith, if you want to make a living in art, that's the job that you should try to go for. So I did do that. I got a major in graphic design. And this was right on the edge of kind of the digital revolution where Photoshop, in class, we had version number 1. And the professors did not know how to use it at all because they didn't need to. They were doing graphic design the old-fashioned way. And so we did most of our projects the old-fashioned way as well, which meant, like, say you want to design a logo for a company. If you wanted the letters in the logo to be blue, you would go to the art supply store and buy a blue sheet of this Pantone paper and draw out the letters on the back and cut it out with an X-Acto knife and then glue and paste it down. It was super, super tedious and super like really slow. But that was kind of the job. And so when I got out of school, trying to get a job in the graphic design business was not easy at all. And so pretty much right away, I went back to school to become an art teacher because it seemed like a really nice way to get to be around art all day, every day. And so that took about another year and a half, not that long actually. And I had one interview, didn't get that job. And then I had one more interview and I did get that one. And so I ended up teaching high school drawing and painting for 21 years at a school in Arvada, Colorado. Yeah, so that was kind of my journey, to getting close to where I am today.
Let's follow up on being an art teacher. Tell us how that experience was like.
Well, it was being around art all day, every day. It was definitely that, so I really, really enjoyed that. It also forced me to get really, really comfortable with a certain set of materials and a certain palette of colors, which I'd never been forced to do before. So we were using acrylics, and that's why I use acrylics now. And we were using a certain line of acrylics, which they're not fancy. They're just student grade. But I got used to them because that's what the kids were using. And they would come up and they would, like one of the main questions if you teach painting at the high school level is how do you mix this color? There's always color mixing questions. And so we just used this set of 15 colors. And so I could pretty much, after 20 years, I could look at any given color and say, okay, well, you got to use this color and this color and this color, and then you'll get it. And so it got my fluency with that color set to be, really, really spot on, because that's all I did all day, every day is like saw. And it also got me really used to a lot of different subject matter too, because kids want to paint. Ultimately, they get their choice and they want to paint everything. They want to paint dogs and helicopters and stuff from their imagination. And they want to do comics and they want to do, just so many things. So I got really comfortable in kind of conversing with being able to pretty much problem solve and draw anything at all, and I was teaching all the basics again and again. So things about perspective, matching values and all that kind of stuff. So what you would call the basics, like the rock solid basics of art were, I was teaching the kids that and again and again and again over the course of 2 decades. And so I was therefore also teaching myself that stuff again and again and again over the course of those 2 decades. So I felt like maybe it shouldn't have taken that longer. Maybe a little bit of a slow study, but I felt like by now anyway, my understanding of those materials and my understanding of that element of it was really, really helped a lot by having the job for that long. It made a big difference.
I wanted to mention this, and I think it's really important for an artist to grow their personal brand. I see you're active with art fairs, festivals. What is your strategy to grow your brand? My first thing was just to get my art. I don't know, I got stuck in this trap a little bit where the only people who ever see your work are your friends and your family. And of course they like it because they like you and they probably like what you're up to. And if it is kind of good, then great. Everyone's going to kind of dig it. But I wanted to find out what everybody else thinks about my work. I kind of got to that point where if I want to take it on seriously, I need to find out more. And so living here in Denver, we have a couple of good art festivals, but one of the biggest ones in the country is this one called the Cherry Creek Arts Festival. And just on an absolute whim, I looked it up and I saw what it took to apply. And I thought to myself, well, I have that many pieces. And they even have this emerging artist program where if you haven't been in shows, you don't have a lot of experience with that, you can apply into that category. So it means you don't have to have a professional display and you don't have to have any kind of resume or have won any kind of awards or anything like that. And so I applied into that, and to my real true surprise, I was accepted. I got in, and they only give out, I want to say it was 5 spots, and they have maybe 300 artists, and they have something like 30. I'm going to butcher this. Maybe 30,000. No, 3,000 apply for 300 spots. I don't know what it is, but it's not a lot of people to get in, and so I was really, really excited and. Okay, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to find out about
people's reaction to my work and really really make this attempt to get my stuff out there. And this is when I was still doing that very, very really hyper realistic kind of stuff. And I sat there. So it takes place over the 4th of July weekend. So I sat there for July 4th, 5th, and 6th that year. They get, this is where that number is. They get something like 300,000 people that come through there. I mean, really, it's like 1/3 people come through that art festival. It's bonkers. It's huge. And so I got to hear from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people about what they thought of my work. And it wasn't that they were talking to me, but they were talking to each other inside my tent, and I could hear it. That was priceless. I mean, that was just amazing to get that much real, true, good criticism right there on the spot. And, I had a few sales and did well, and there was a good success from that kind of standpoint. And it really made me think, okay, there's a seed here. If I push this, and if I have other venues where I can get my work in front of this many people on a routine basis, there's a chance I could actually kind of crack through to the level where I could make a living doing this. So that was the impetus to say, all right, I've been kind of posting on Instagram and kind of posting on Facebook just every so often. But I knew that in order to get my work out there in front of other people and have people care about it, if you want it to be a brand, why do people like a TV show? They like it because it's on every week and they have access to it and they can see it. And so I kind of felt the same with my art is I need to get it out there, and I need to get it out there often so that people who like it can look for it and find it and make it easy and know that it won't go too long without seeing it. And so it just made me take the whole thing more seriously. I'm going to get my work out there. I'm going to find ways to get it in front of people's eyes. And then kind of just with that through time, people have found it more. And I can tell you that every good thing I've gotten through art so far has been through marketing online, through really pushing my work, and especially through Instagram, because it's such a visual source, and getting people to see it that way.
I think I saw that you do commission work. Do you typically have fans of your work that are returning customers that buy or commission work from you over and over again?
I would say it's still early enough in my career that I don't have a bunch who are returning yet, but I have a lot of people who have asked about commissions and have done commissions. And so I'm hoping now, because I've only been with the gallery that I'm with right now, I've only been with them for 7 months. So I'm hoping that will lend itself to that, because, building a relationship with the artists and kind of, I heard there's an artist whose work I really admire her work, and she phrased it very well. She said, under promise and over deliver. To me, that really struck a chord, thinking of that, okay, if I can make it even better than what you described and get it to you faster and get it to you under budget, to where I can say, I really thought this was going to be $3,200, but I was done 2 days early and I really busted my hump on this. And guess what? It's not, it's less. And people, if you're accurate with I kind of account for my own time myself, but I love to be able to get it done in an efficient way and give people a good surprise like that on the back end when I can. It doesn't always happen, but when I can. And so just things like that I kind of I hope that down the road people will remember, he was easy to work with. He got it done when he said he would get it done. He got it done for actually a little bit less than he thought it might be. We usually sign a contract, but if I can say I got it done faster and I can save someone a little money, I will. It's worth it for me to do that.
Yeah, let's piggyback on that. Just so maybe future buyers and fans of your work, do they just come to you with an idea? Do they send you photos of what they want you to paint? Tell us a little bit on a case study where somebody has worked with you and got something commissioned. How does that look like?
Okay, so now since I'm represented by a gallery, the only way they can get a commission done is through the gallery. And so they will contact Keiko Gallery and talk to the owner, Vina, and she will kind of be the go-between. So she kind of acts as my agent. And so she will talk to the client and figure out what it is they want and what their prospective budget is. And if those things are kind of in my wheelhouse, you know what I mean? If it's okay, well, all things being equal, this sounds like a job Keith would like to do and can do. Let's get him in on this. And so then she'll give me a call and we'll set up 3-way phone call with the client. And then that way I can ask questions and then he or she can explain what their vision is, and we can agree to a tentative price and a deadline. And then in some cases, they have very, very specific imagery that they want me to work from. And it might be, say, photos from a honeymoon or something like that. And so if that's the case, then they'll just email them to me, and they might say, okay, well, we want this element from this one and this element from this one. And can you kind of recreate or combine a virtual version of what we're talking about? And so then I will try to make sure I understand their ideas. I might send them some sketches if I think I need to, or I do use Photoshop a lot to help me because it's perfect for editing. And so I might Photoshop some things together and say, is this kind of what you had in mind? And then once we get an okay on the commission, the details of the composition and the layout and all that stuff, then yeah, I'll just start painting and get after it. And then when that's done, I'll show it to them, send them digital photos of it. And then if they want to request any changes, that's the time they can do that. And then if everything is good to go, I will typically ship it to the gallery, and then they will take photos of it to have as an archival record, and then they'll be the ones who ship it out to the client. And which also kind of works in another way too, because I'll usually retain the copyright. And so if it's a potentially popular piece, the gallery that represents me, they produce prints of everything and sell those as well. And so I don't have to do that part of it. She'll get whatever she might need in order to be able to produce prints for the future. And then she'll send it to the client. And then once the client gets it, then we all get paid. And that's pretty much how it usually goes. So from beginning to end, I would say a really challenging piece might take me 2 weeks, but I'm painting full time. So that's rare. I would say more like a week, give or take, with all the work. You can do a lot in 40 hours in a given week. So I'm usually pretty efficient, I'm pretty fast. I work hard every day. I give myself a very strict schedule and I stick to it. And so I get a lot done.
2 questions here to touch upon what you just said there. But the first one is, and I think a lot of artists want to know this, how does one artist transition from their full-time work to be 100% not dependent on an employer anymore, but to be a full-time artist? How did you make that transition?
That was definitely, there's no other way to describe it. Well, so it's kind of a leap of faith, and it was also serendipity, because being an art teacher, I get 3 months in the summer. I get basically June, July, and August, where I can absolutely paint full time anyway. So I've always done that to a degree, minus travel and things with my, daughter and things like that, my wife's family and stuff like that. So what ultimately had to happen, and this is kind of the serendipity part, being a teacher allowed me to take a leave of absence from teaching. So they used to call it a sabbatical, which would, I think in colleges was meant that you got paid to do research or write a book, or I think artists would paint and prepare for an exhibition. In public school, they don't really even call it the sabbatical anymore. They call it a leave of absence, but it kind of amounts to the same thing. I just had to go in and tell them, hey, I would like to take a year off. And they say, not a problem. And you're guaranteed to get the same job back in the same school and the same everything, and just take a year off and do it. And I thought, I'm going to find out, do I like doing art all day, every day? Or am I going to drive myself bonkers being in the studio by myself all day, every day? And so it was really kind of that self-exploration where I wanted to see, does it suit my temp? I'm so used to being around high school kids all day. Like, am I going to miss that interaction? Am I going to feel, lonely when it's just me in the quiet house and the cats and there's nothing else going on? And then, COVID came along and they extended sabbaticals for anybody who wanted one. They said, you can take another year, which normally you can't take 2 years in a row, but this year was an exception because of COVID. And so I said, you know what? I think I will take another year. Thank you very much. Because I had signed with that gallery, with Keiko Gallery last year. And so I thought, now I took 1 year. Now I'm being given another year to really, really focus and do everything I can do to make this work. And so from that perspective, and I sympathize, because actually when I was teaching, there were still many, many, many nights when I had commissioned work and I had projects and I was preparing for other shows and things where I would teach all day long. And I make it sound like it's that bad. It really wasn't that bad, but I'd get home, 4:00. And then I would say, okay, well, I have a lot of work left to do. So I'd paint till 7 or 8 o'clock. And I kind of did that for years, where I would just teach all day and then paint most of the evening and just try to keep really productive and keep getting together a body of work. Because every time I went to a gallery and I would ask about showing my work there, they would typically say something like, hey, you have 3 or 4 pieces, man, that's super cool. But if you want to have a show here or something like that, we need 20 pieces. And when I was doing the hyper realist stuff, I could spend 3 or 4 months on a piece. And I'm like, okay, well, let's see, that's 3 pieces a year and they need 20 pieces. So that's 7 years. Cool, man. I'll see you in 7 years. So that was, of course, another reason to want to change my style. Oh gosh, where was I going with that? I totally lost where I was headed with that thought. But anyway, the point was I had to be willing to put in the work outside of my 9 to 5 for a long time in order to build up the level of work and have enough pieces. I mean, the gallery in New Orleans, they would never have been interested in my work at all if I hadn't shown them that, hey, I think I had 25 pieces when I got in touch with them and we really got a conversation rolling. And that made the difference. They were saying, not only do we like his work, but he's got enough of it that we can put up a show as soon as he can get his pieces here. We could put it up next week. And so that made the big difference.
You've mentioned galleries representing you. I know a lot of young artists would love to partner up with a gallery. Can you give us some insight, some recommendations on how an artist can successfully partner with a gallery?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, it's a bit of a battle to kind of find the right gallery and make those connections. So my thing is, I've enjoyed and I've wanted to paint New Orleans for a long time. So my advice kind of may not really work for everybody, but what I ended up doing was thinking, okay, if I want to sell my work, the best place to sell it would be in New Orleans, because that's kind of what I'm painting a lot of and continue to. And so when I would go there to travel around and take pictures and look at it all, I would just obsessively crawl all over the city and get the contact information for galleries and look inside every single gallery and try to find ones that sold work that was in the same kind of flavor as mine. I didn't want one that looked just like my work because they don't need me. They've already got me. You know what I mean? Like, they've already got one just like that. But something that for sure, so realism and working with the enjoyment of the architecture, all that kind of stuff. So, and then it was just a matter of narrowing it down to maybe the 10 that seemed like most likely to say yes eventually. and then I would just send them. And that actually, this is where Instagram was such a godsend, because I didn't have to send out like mail. I could just send them a message to their inbox or an email also, but Instagram was much better, and say, hey, here's what I've been working on. Here's my newest piece. And I would do that every couple of months. I wouldn't want to annoy them, but every 3 or 4 months I could say, here are the last like 2 or 3 paintings that I've done, just so you can see what I've been up to. And if you want any more information, let me know, or, whatever I can do to help. And so I kind of just tried to stay on the radar and become a familiar name and a familiar person, because I know that these galleries, like, they get hit up a lot. There are a lot of people who want to be artists for sure. But if you see the same name again and again, and month in and month out and month in and month out, then you kind of start to make an impression. And then it's just a matter of if they like your work and think they can sell it, which ultimately is what they're really evaluating, is do they think they can make money, because they're a business, right? I had one gallery tell me, we just don't really dig your style, kind of brutal. And I'm like, hey, you know what? But that's okay, because that way I know this gallery is not a fit for me. Not a problem. It's like, thanks for your time. I appreciate the honest feedback, and, good luck in the future. Not a problem. And then some say we only represent people who live here in town, because we have a lot of artists here in New Orleans that want to sell their work in our gallery. And so we feel bad taking in an out-of-stater. And so I say, same thing. I don't live there. Can't really battle that one. Can't argue with you there. So, okay, cool. Thanks for that note. And I appreciate that. And so, but when I finally found the one that did, it took a few conversations and several months of follow-ups and emails and things like that. But when we got there, it was like it was a real match made in heaven, and it's worked out very, very well. So I'm very happy about that.
That's awesome. Very, very insightful. Let's hit you up with some rapid fire questions just to get to know Keith.
Okay.
All right. So, like, what type of music or what do you listen to when you're drawing or painting?
A lot of the classics. Beatles. I'll listen to Led Zeppelin. I love New Orleans jazz, so I will definitely listen to that. And I also watch a lot of movies and TV shows while I'm painting.
Nice. And what would you consider a dream project for you?
Dream project. I love doing actually movie posters. If they were still doing movie posters like illustrated, there's just a few out there, not many. I would love to have the chance to work on some actual movie posters that would be in the theaters. I think that'd be amazing.
Awesome. Name me some artists that you think people should know about.
Well, these might be ones that people already do know about, but I will give you them to you anyway. So Alphonse Mucha is one. Of course, Norman Rockwell. People somehow forget him, which drives me crazy. Andrew Wyeth is one I love. James Gurney, creator of Dinotopia, just fantastic fundamentals. So I love his stuff. Rod Penner, photorealist artist like nothing you've ever seen. I would say Adam Hughes, comic book artist, but the ink work that he does, oh my gosh, unbelievable. And then lots and lots of contemporary painters, but Dorian Vallejo is one whose work I really, really respond to. Colleen Barry for her color theory. Those are some good ones.
Fantastic. And let me ask you one final question.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, how do you personally define success?
That's a good question. There's so many ways to come at it, but I think success is the ability, for me, I think maybe success is the ability to keep on doing what you love well enough that you're willing to keep doing it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Keith, thank you for sharing us your creative journey, continued success in the future, and finally, tell us again where people can connect with you.
So if you want to look at my work on Instagram, that's KL Oelschlager. I'll spell that for you. So KL are my first two initials, and Oelschlager is OELSCHLAGER. That's my personal Instagram, so you can pretty much see everything there. And then the gallery is at Keiko, K-A-K-O. So at Keiko Gallery. Those are the best two bets to see the majority of my work for sure.
Awesome. And thank you, Keith. Until next time, take care, everyone. Yeah, and bye.
Bye-bye.